sympathetic nervous systems, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
And
Yes.
regulating those.
Yes. So I'm sure some people would see this as like a sympathetic parasympathetic imbalance, but I think it's so simple that we can take it all the way back to, if we know that we are an ambulating species, but we're also a repairing species, which is true of like anything that's even a very simple organism, not even a mammal. That's one facet of how we need to interpret the cues from our body. Like, do we need to keep moving or do we need to stop? Right? And that it's tied to our pain sensors, and that we have some fail safes where if we need to keep moving even though we're in pain, we can. And we have some fail safes where if we need to stop moving even though we're injured, we can also do that because we know when to stop. And what we've lost in our society is the good feeling
Mm.
of stopping. So Mr. Rogers calls that the good feeling of self control. When we stop and can reassure ourselves of safety, which we've made a culture that psychologically makes that very difficult to do. We have so many social realities that say you're not safe. But if we can stop and
They
acknowledge
punish you
safety,
also for trying to gain
yes,
safety.
yes, exactly, exactly. And even if the punishment doesn't come, you're aware of the narrative of the threat or the meme of the threat. And so when you try to take a
Mhm.
rest, you think you're falling behind. You think you should be running. So it's we're burning
Yeah.
ourselves out. And so if I can tell people that that's what is happening enough times, I think they'll start to see the pattern in their own lives, because it's fundamental. Like, this is something that has been with us as a species as far back as we look like little, worms, or maybe even before that. But the things that could start to ambulate at all, that's where I think this starts. That I need to know when to go, I need to know when to stop. And there's these um idiosyncratic, sort of ironic times. I don't know if that's the right word. There's a better word for that. But there's these times where I will need to go, even though the pain signal often means stop, and I will need to stop, even though the pain signal can also mean go. Like, I'll need to have more discernment, and we could call that maturity.
Mm. Yeah. I think discernment to like what's your perception, the values that you hold, because in deciding when to stop and for what reason, it just like, reminds me of like this one, I think psychologist, he kind of his phrases was like, don't ask us you need, but why you need that thing.
Interesting. Say that one more time. So it's, don't ask, was it?
What you need.
What you
Don't
need.
ask. It's like rather than asking what you need, ask why you need that specific thing.
Interesting. Hmm.
Like, oh, because I think this ties into if you feel the need to do something or to plunge into something, it's like what intentions lie behind that desire, and then are they truly towards your nourishment, or are they based on a response that doesn't apply anymore to the current reality or to who you wish to be, if that makes sense?
Yes, it does. And I'm doing.
Jane, you had been talking to me recently about the difference between thinking that you want something and like actually needing it or
Oh,
being
liking. So psychologically,
okay.
if you go into research around motivation and greed, was where they brought this up, but it's apparently well known within neuroscientists that are trying to look at like incentives in people, right? There's a difference
Mm-hmm.
neurologically between wanting something and liking something. So want and need are probably kind
Mm.
of in the same ballpark, but want, I believe, is indicating the doing as arriving endpoint in space, and like is the stop position. So wanting is the go thing, where you expect the reward because you're going to it, and liking is the stop thing, where you're getting the reward because you've stopped with it. and you're staying with it to
Mm-hmm.
like it. So that's why the doing as building can be so successful and stable and recursive in a way that doing as arriving just isn't. Doing as arriving is much more unstable. Doing as building, I can like you, and then I want to stop to be with you. And if you also like me and like working with me and I like working with you, we can stop together and then we can do a lot of work. But the problem is we have this doing as arriving, as also as in like do gets transformed into due, like do, this is do. You can have people that they've stopped and they're working on something they like, and then somebody says you have to stop liking that now because you have to go over here. So now you've
Or they'll try to
interrupted that.
brainwash you into thinking they, yeah.
Well, I think they've really lost the plot, to be honest. Like I think they don't know that their motivation is more simplistic. It's just they feel like they can get a reliable hit of pain relief from wanting something and doing the go actions of wanting, right? Instead of they haven't had experience with the stop action, the stopping and then liking action.
Hmm.
So there's the liking is a
Oh,
different
but in
good
order
feeling.
to, mhm. In order to know what you like, it's like you do have to have that space to have the experiences to determine, right? First, if you have your any likes, what those likes are. And a lot of people, I feel like they either choose, well, they don't, or they're in situations or circumstances where they cannot determine that. And then like things like covetousness, right? And like I feel like a lot of wants that people have come from coveting something that somebody else
Hmm.
has. Yeah. Because what? Because their parents or their civilization, their culture, their society, or whatever thing influence they've subscribed or given their agency to says that that is what they ought to want. And it almost feels like there's like an abusive, like there's something that shows an abusive partnerships or just relationships that I've noticed, which is like abusers sometimes will get you to feel bad by like pointing to like somebody else and being like, you're bad, look at this person, they're like better than you, they're doing things properly, why can't you be like them?
Hmm.
So like again, it goes back to polarization somehow,
Hmm.
it feels like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the problem with polarization too, so they say you should be like this person, right? So then you're chasing that
Hmm.
person, but that person is chasing something else. So now the
Yeah.
person sees you as competition, trying to overtake them. So where's the mentorship? Where's the collaboration? So if I was told like you should be like this person and the person is a builder, what would end up happening is I would just walk up to the person, they're not moving, I'd be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they'll be like, "Well, I'm doing this." I'm like, "Huh, okay." And then I would actually learn something. But that's definitely not what
Hmm.
is happening.
Well, because I guess in our society and culture, the builders typically don't get, reimbursed, honored.
Yeah.
They're not exactly kind of sustainably taken care of, right?
Well, because the trophies are supposed to go at the end of wanting. The trophies, so that's why people are going in that direction at all. And if you have the trophies, that's money now. And that's what you need to buy the stuff
Hmm.
to work on things. So the builders are not getting given the materials they need to build. Because in order to get that, you'd have to do the running thing. But the problem there, it's if it's two different skills and it's two ways of listening to your body to get pain relief. And if you're very
Hmm.
skilled at doing as arriving, the doing as building, the liking will get atrophied. And that means you cannot
Yep.
stop to build anymore. Because if you stop to build, now you have fallen behind in the doing as arriving race. So the worst outcome of that, which
Hmm.
we're now experiencing, the most efficient people at the doing as arriving sabotage other people. Not only do they not stop to build, they steal things from people that build while they run towards the finish line. They kick and hurt other people that are running towards the wanting finish line, and they arrive and get all the money and they have no idea what to do with it because they've never built a day in their life.
No, they say that it's playing dirty, right? That's what you need to do to win
Right.
in
And
their world.
it's totally empty. There's no point to them winning at all. These let me read what Jamie's saying too. So there's a couple things in the chat. But the payback will be like, wait, doesn't with interest in that time. Yeah, you have to spend time with the item that you like. Like that's how time should be spent. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. If we're gonna think of
But
time
but
that
then
way.
also at the same time, when you live in a when you live in a world with people like this running about and being in high positions of power or influence, sometimes you might worry that wanting to spend time with the thing that you like it might be taken away or it might be sabotaged or damaged, right?
Well, so
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 it's
what people need to do, this is going
yeah.
to sound crazy when I reinforce this, and this is going to respond to you and also to Jamie. Like I am being so
Hmm.
literal right now. What you actually need to do is literally stop your body and work on something until you're done working on it based on the logic of the thing. You have to like something and ignore
Yeah.
everybody telling you to stop because they're fucking wrong. You continue to, and they're not telling you to stop, they're telling you to go. When people tell you to stop working on something, they're telling you to go work on something else, which is the rat race or whatever. You have to, you actually have to
Mm.
look at them and say, you can go, I'm not moving. I don't care if you think something bad is going to happen to me. Keep running. I'm not running from the pack of wolves that you're running from. You got to go. I got to stay because I have to train my brain to understand the good feeling of being with something and liking it. If I do not do that, my brain is not going to know when to do it in the future in more abstract ways. So we literally have to just freeze our body, look at a thing, and work on it. And it sounds crazy that we have to
Mm.
be this literal, but we do because the society has made all of these really abstract, convoluted things that are just making your body run around. And it could get internalized into your mind as well. That like you are looking for
Yeah.
abstract ways to get pain relief through mania. Like that is what go
Yep.
so high valence, high arousal, that is freaking mania. And we all have some brushes with mania. It's just a state your brain can get into. Some people get stuck there. Just depends on what your brain is like. But the society has told us over and over again, here's a fantasy you can have that's about you running towards the finish line, knocking things out of the way. Things are attacking you. You cannot stop. You cannot stop. You cannot stop. So the pressure you will have is people telling you you cannot stop, and they're fucking wrong. And we have to
Mm.
tell them not only are they
Oh,
wrong.
Jane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, it's but it's often that in the doing is arriving model, like any religion, the I guess the lie that they tell you is that stopping, that peace, that sort of stability within yourself is found external to yourself.
Mhm.
Like it's
Mhm.
it's an afterlife. It's a place
Yes.
that has all the resources that you need, even
Yes.
though if people might be living there and that, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
That's a lie. It's all a pyramid scheme.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do that. And the way that society has gone now, nobody is hanging out with the likable things. So if you just stop and hang out with the real likable things, they're nowhere near the money. So I can get books for free. I can get papers for free that nobody's guarding because they don't even realize they're meaningful anymore. They don't know. Like all they know is
Mm.
someone's got a lot of money. I want to go where the person with a lot of money is. And those people with a lot of money are very dangerous people. You do not want to go near them because the reason they have that much money is they've beaten the crap out of people on the race to get to that much money. They're not good people in the sense of like
Mm-hmm.
healthy, or they don't care about what happens to your body. They don't care about what happens to likable things. They don't care. Now that's not to go too far into like antagonizing such individuals. The system puts those people in that position, but you don't want to go anywhere near them. So who cares if they have a lot of money at this point? We're going to have to like have a much more fundamental conversation as a species about this, and just say, oh well, this may be difficult to fix, but if we can't talk about the fundamental problem successfully, we'll never get it.
It's true. But I mean, also just there's also just a very like practical thing of those people do not care for people outside of themselves and their very immediate circle. They don't give a shit about anybody who basically don't perceive. Like they don't even perceive other people as human.
Yeah.
The higher you get
Oh, they
in
don't even
those
perceive
realms.
themselves. Like the point. So that triangle I was talking about, it starts in you. So
Right, right.
they don't even do that with
Yes.
themselves. That's why they do things like project onto other people. It explains that better. So they're running away from the part of
Mm.
themselves that could say like, "Hey, do you know that you're not what you're saying you are?" They're
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
pathology of like how disconnected they are from self-awareness is because that I'll do the difference between like the doing is building inward facing triangle that creates a third thing, an insight,
Hmm.
you look in, um versus the doing as arriving triangle that is triangulation, right? So they are seeing
Yeah.
themselves as running away and they're the victim, or sometimes they're the hero, but there's two other people. Anybody who's not
Hmm.
them is one of these antagonistic or complementary forces to get them to what they want, and they do it literally inside of their own memories and mind. So they use themselves. They are exploiting themselves. They don't like themselves. They want to like
Yep.
themselves,
It's
sure, but they don't like anything. They only want.
yeah, I wonder whether almost there's like a reconciling. I'm reminded of a quote from Dark Matter 25. You know, he said at the end of the video that like, oh, when you're young, kids tend to have imaginary friends. But a lot of adults, when they get older, they tend to make imaginary enemies, right?
Mm, mm-hmm.
So it's like we all have an imagination, right? And in some ways, like it's through imagination that sometimes you can actually even like change the reality that you have because you imagine a path that you would walk. But like, these people almost, rather than like staying with the things that they like and going for things that they supposedly want, it's like it feels to me like their imagination is not tempered by something like humanity or like groundedness or I guess something that they're building with their own hands.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know. I feel like mentioning this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And one that there's people that argue that we're caught in like a narcissistic imagination, like the inner workings of somebody who
Mm.
has what we call narcissism is reflected in like all of the beliefs about people. It's beliefs that they have about it's beliefs that they've cultivated through what I think is the doing as a arriving reward pathway, becoming extremely addictive to the point that it's like almost poisonous to everything else. um so yeah.
Oh, you know what this makes me think, Jane?
Mm,
It's there was a very good feast now, which I'm interested in. I'm looking into neuroplasticity and how, in some ways, the structure of the universe and how how stars are and their sort of like their life cycle is in some ways has a lot of similarities in pattern and structure to the formation of the human brain
oh,
and how
interesting. Huh.
individuality and identity forms.
Huh.
So like when you take this like sort of like this cosmic like universal principle, I think from neuroplasticity, when we talk about things like narcissism or the fact that like some of these like Trump and Elon Musk, they obviously have a lot of influence or sway on what we call as influence, right? Another word that we might also say is that they have a lot of gravitas or gravity. And like typically the bigger that a star grows or planet, right? And the more matter that it accumulates and pulls into its gravitational orbit, it
Hmm. Yeah. Mhm. One second. Let me. I like that. I like this. Let me. I'm just having a little bit of a problem. One sec. I'm having. My headset is acting really weird. My other headset just died on me, so I didn't realize it was low on battery, and then I'm having problems getting this to work. Hmm. This is so strange. Oh, here it is. Okay, I think I fixed it. Can you talk a little bit?
Yeah, 1 2 1
Yeah.
2.
Oh wait, but now I can't hear you.
Yeah.
What? Hold
Okay.
up. What the hell? What the heck? Why can't I hear you?
Check your
Oh, this is so weird.
check
Okay, one
your
second.
inputs and outputs.
Why? Okay. Oh boy. What is going on? Hmm. That is not what that's supposed to be.
We're getting there, folks. We're getting
Oh, I'm
there.
so confused right
For
now.
anybody who hears me.
Because I can't hear, but why can't I hear? So I can hear you if I have you on here, but then they can't hear you. This is so weird. Okay.
For me.
Oh wait,
Mm.
maybe now they can? Wait, can they? No, that doesn't make sense. Wait, you
Oh,
talk.
1 2 1 2. Can you folks hear me?
I think it works
1
now.
2 1 2. Testing, testing.
Okay, I think I
Okay,
fixed it. All right.
gotcha.
So sorry about that. Okay, so the stars have a gravitational. Can you explain this one more time?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, oh, so perhaps like the thesis would be something like, well, in some ways we have a star within us. We can be like the human brain, right? Not say that we are like literally a star, but like the principles behind how like celestial bodies are formed is similar to perhaps how the brain is formed as well. Usually, like you start off when you're young, like you're often small and don't have a lot of memories or experiences. You're often imitating, picking things environment. You don't exert a lot of gravitation, right? As you mature, as you get bigger and you collect more mass from other material around you, right? You tend to grow in size. You also kind of move slower. Uh, Depends though. Sometimes you can move slower, but then like obviously then your gravitational pull and the influence that you exert gets bigger and bigger. And a star obviously if it gets big collapse under the weight of its own mass, right? And it
Hmm.
becomes a singularity or a black hole where like its force already kind of exceeds basically nothing can escape it, right?
Hmm.
Like light can't escape a black hole. And so I reckon that maybe a pattern where as you get older and individuate, like as more patterns and connections and synaptic links grow in your brain, they can get to a point when there's so many links that it sort of folds itself into something that is also similar to a singularity.
Mm.
Uh, and that exerts a very strong gravitational force, right?
Hmm.
The bigger the object, the more mass, which, to a brain can be like more memories, more experiences. But then let's take it in terms of like politics or social media, right? If we're talking about influence in that perspective, depending on how you control the narrative or the perception of like how far your influence reaches, who's talking about you or whatever, right? Like who controls the media, the narrative, directed. Like a person can then grow to have a much greater influence than they otherwise would. And I think that's what is obviously happening with some of these figures like Trump or Elon Musk or whatever.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people gravitate, obviously, then those who perhaps aren't seeing it for what it is, aren't thinking about the nature of what's happening, they'll gravitate around that orbit. Some of them who are very, very close to that, eventually, they pass through the event horizon and they lose their own individuality. It's almost impossible to sort of like bring them back. Like these would be like very radicalized people, right? Extremely conservative, traditional. right? Where it would be cognitive dissonance, and like it would just be near impossible to pull them out of that to like, a place where we are at, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But like people like ourselves, we're like more on the fringes of that system, that solar system, for example, right? And so you might still be affected by that gravitational pull, but obviously a lot less. So you can like obviously escape more, you can do more of your own things. And then even you affect a little bit of gravity on that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, that a lot of people put together with specific intention can affect the gravitational pull of like really big bodies or, influences. But obviously a lot of people don't believe that. Similar as to how they don't believe that they can like neuroplasticity. The idea of neuroplasticity is that you can rewire and sort of like redesign the pathways that are in your body and in your mind and your nervous system, right? I
Mm-hmm.
know this especially for those who have like gone through trauma, right? Part of therapy, but part of grounding, part of stop, I think, as you were describing, is part of that. Like you can rewire neural pathways by doing things like that, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
would move more towards not having an atrophied function of liking something and being present with it and enjoying it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you actually did stop, you would be able to do it more.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel somehow it's all connected. Yeah.
No, I think so too. Well, so I want to drill down on your idea a little bit because one thing that
Okay.
Stephen Hassan says is that, and also Bandy X Lee says this. So both of these people that have studied Trump and as a cult figure, that the Trump situation in
Hmm.
particular, but even more generally in cults, like the leader of the cult, the
Yep.
person that's leading it will like transfer their personality to the people following them. So then these individuals develop a
They do.
cult. Yeah, they develop a cult personality, and in some cults they even like they have changes to your name, and like there's all these like identifications that would like traditionally yours to define
Hmm.
as your self identity that become your cult identity. So I'm kind of curious, like, if you,
Hmm.
with that in mind, how does that slot into the model you're giving?
Yeah. So in that case, it's kind of like, well, it would be similar to take our solar system, for example, right? The person who's the cult leader, originally themselves, like they will position themselves in the middle of things, make themselves very visible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also to do with light. Light meaning like illumination, so perception, the dialogues between like different planets, which is to say like different people, different connections within that group, within that cult. Like they'll I think like basically because the sun's at the center and it has like a strong gravitational pull, like in a cult members often like give all their resources, right? Like their time, their attention, their resources will always go to like the cult leader first and like themselves second, because that's how like the system's built, right? Typically,
Well,
as
and
far
that
as I'm aware.
is that fair for me to
So like they'll
consider that
slow.
hoarding of
Mm.
objects and money and in our system? Is that like
Say that
could
again. Sorry.
in our system could I think of that resources, hoarding of money, hoarding of objects that could be used to build with?
Hmm. Yes, it would. Oh, so okay, so just maybe to clarify on the sun analogy, because I think all of us in some ways are the center of our own like created solar systems, right? There's things that gravitate within our own perception. We illuminate the world with our perception and the connection, the perspectives that we have. But I
Mm-hmm.
think people who hoard a lot and set up these sorts of structures, I paradoxically feel that they do it because they somehow think, or they often think that they don't have any light at all. Like because narcissists often do these things from a place of insecurity,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not confident in themselves. Like somebody who's just confident in their like material lives doesn't need to like fight to get $1 billion, right? And scratch and claw and like get in this zero sum game. They feel as though they are not abundant, that they don't have like enough stuff, or that they don't look good enough, or they don't like, they're not whatever, they're
Well, they
insufficient in
don't.
some
They
way.
are insufficient. I mean, so they are incompetent. That's what's so striking about this. So my model, this is what I want to drill down into the
Hmm.
sun thing. They are incompetent because competency demands you to stop and understand the good feeling of self-control and liking something. They regulate their
Hmm.
all of their pain by trying to do as arrive, and they have never regulated anything through doing as building. So they are deficient,
Hmm.
and they shouldn't be any of the places they are because they are not competent people and they're not safe
Hmm.
people. They will hurt people in order to stay
No.
in the spotlight. So what they want, they realize that everyone else has a spotlight of attention, like that everyone else is shining light out. They want everyone to direct that
Hmm.
light to them. And the only way they can do that
Yes.
is by hoarding things that people want to build with, that people want to bring their light onto to look at. So they are
Oh, that
sitting
ties to dependency. They want to make obviously other people dependent on them. Yeah.
right, but they don't actually, they're like the dragon sitting on the, mountain of gold that means nothing to
Gold.
them. All
Yeah.
they want is your attention. And they don't
Well, yeah.
realize that you don't actually like them. You just want all of the stuff that they're hoarding because you like to do as build. And so they're forcing us to
Hmm.
do as arrive in order to just look at them. And they are really good at attacking people and making them feel bad and hurting them and making other people, hurt them on their behalf. Like that's their skill.
They
Um,
they also they also like have done what I think they've also done is that they've taken on this like gold hoarding like task because other people have told them that, oh, this is in your best interest, and when they become miserable by it, I feel want to make sure that everybody else does the same so they also feel miserable
but it's
as
yeah.
well. Like there
So
was a spite thing. Yeah.
what Jamie said, like the resource hoarding gives them value, it gives them importance, but they're not actually valuable. It makes them seem like if you get closer to them, you can grab the things around them. They aren't important
Yep.
at all. The only thing that's important is the things that they are standing in front of. That's it. So
Oh, they can't conceive that anybody would like them. They only see themselves as middlemen to like the things people actually want, but they themselves don't think that anybody would ever actually gravitate because they would just like them for who they are rather
right.
than
And
what
they
they've
they
hoarded.
they have made themselves deeply unlikable because they literally have hurt hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions, if not billions of people. They are not
Yeah.
likable
Well, like a
anymore.
dragon.
Yeah.
Like a dragon. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are familiar with this problem. We just haven't broken it down to how fundamental this is to the species and to, I think, probably most of life on Earth, but in us in particular, because if we don't do as build, this will happen and it will psychologically torture everyone
Yeah, of course.
because I do not want to be hooked up to doing as arriving as my pain regulation. That's insane because I know it doesn't make any sense. And I know that people who are addicted to that begin to like they just are very destructive. They're and I have working empathy. I
Like
don't.
addicts. Yeah.
Yeah, like addicts. They are addicts. And I think we're going to discover this is actually just a continuum of addiction that we could, if we understood this, we'll understand addiction much better and how to help people with addiction. So one of the reasons we're having problems with addiction is we're not treating these people like Trump the way that they need to be treated,
Hmm.
where they're not the center of attention. We need to study their whole cohort as a naturally occurring phenomena, given the kind of organism we are and the kind of dynamics that have been set up. They aren't special at all. They are just what happens when humanity doesn't understand there's a motivational split between doing as building, doing as arriving, and that a ton of people who are manipulative socially have exploited that split. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
Do you see how like it's a lot simpler, and that's what I want people
It
to know.
is. But then, though these things are simple, like it's the like a lot of these guys have gotten to the places where they are because of the decisions that a lot of people have not made at specific points in time. Like to make sure that the let's say like the judicial, the legislative process is fair, right? That like the laws that are put in are not secretly being taken away by groups and whatever. And it's like a lot of people don't sort of like think about like what's their responsibility and agency as a human being for this planet and what they sort of have to do. Like often it's sort of like people look to other people to give them answers or to
Well, they
regulate
should.
themselves.
They should, but what they should do is they need to regulate themselves by doing its building, and they need to regulate with others by doing its building. Do not try to
Yeah,
regulate yourself with doing as arriving because you will hurt yourself and other people. And then you can't do as build
of
with them because they're
course,
not going to
but
want to.
they're not gonna want to because, as always, their fears are gonna be leveraged. It's always about weaponizing fear in order to like go after these imaginary enemies, right? They'll always do the oldest tricks in the books of like we can do the building thing. We can just relax, look, right? Utopias ain't real or anything like that. Like you're just gonna you're just gonna chill. That other person over there is gonna come in and steal your
Yep.
stuff, break you down because you like lay your hand down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you stopped. You're not supposed to stop. It's such a simple thing. And what you have to say is that if somebody attacks me while I'm building something, we as a society have to say no. That's not what you need to actually have people turn in to support the person who is building and get the person who is trying to
Hmm.
hurt them out. We now that what we do with that person after that is probably have to study it. We have to study and see, like, can we get people to act and behave that way to do as build instead? And if the answer is no,
So,
how early do we need to intervene to prevent someone turning out that way? What environments can we simply not have people grow up in?
well, that's theoretically how the system ought to work. Like most people, like they trying to avoid pain, as we were talking about. And it'll always be like they will, obviously, most people, most all people care about self-defense, right, for their immediate family. And they will want their folks to just be safe and comfortable to do what they're doing. But I feel like what you're talking about is this, that on a societal level, like there's not enough of like a mutual effort to actually like put in place these systems, or laws have been put in over like the last 50 years of trying to make things better in specific ways for different groups, but they just keep getting a lot of opposition, often subtle, stealthy opposition to try to get rid of those, positive structures
Yeah,
so that the malicious actor
yeah.
can benefit as much as possible.
But so the solution to that is to break this down as fundamentally as I'm saying. So I am saying
Yeah,
whenever
yeah.
somebody is doing as arriving, you have a problem, unless everyone's doing it as a short-term game, that will be stopped if doing
Hmm.
as building is threatened or harmed by that activity. The end. And if somebody insists on doing as arriving, all we have to have this model understood as well as possible to say, nope, we're going to surround you then and we're going to do is build you for a moment. We're going to try to figure out what's going on with you. You just want attention? Okay, that's not helpful to us. Do you see all this stuff we're trying to build? Oh, you don't care about it? Okay, we're going to have to remove you. We're going to have to possibly institutionalize you with people who can try to sort you out. And that sounds scary to people because we've had abuse of institutions where it takes you out of doing as arriving competitions, right? And so we're like, oh, but what if
Hmm.
someone takes me out of the doing as arriving competition? I'm like, well, that's great news because being in a doing arriving competition is insane. So we want you to be able to do as build. So that means we need to identify what you're good at building, how you can stay on task with building, who you're good building with, and that's reciprocal. If you say you're good building with me and I say you're not, then it's not happening. That's forcing me to do something where you're moving me through space instead of us collectively working
Mm.
together. So we need to get really good at understanding this, and we haven't had um, the opportunity to break it down because it's not the way of thinking that is used by the people who are controlling the money, the media, the resources. So when we see stuff, we're seeing their weird lens of doing as arriving reflected back because that's them legitimizing why they have stuff in the first place and why stuff sucks. They're like, well, stuff just sucks, right? See, I'm right by all the stuff and it sucks. I'm like, no, it sucks because you're right by all the stuff. You're not good at working with stuff. Doing as arriving, kingpin. You're horrible at working with stuff. You don't know how to build anything. You're a fraud. You're a con man. We have words for it. So we basically, like, we literally just need to say that over and over and over again until we get it. And that's how we learn anyway, is just repetition.
You're right, but then I wonder, like, there's certain considerations that I wonder, like, how your model would account. So,
Mm,
you know,
yeah.
that is how it would work. But then, like, what sort of that banks on there being like unified solidarity and
Yeah.
people obviously moving forward to do these things.
Well, stopping
But
doing these
obviously
things
they are
is not
aware,
really
like the
hard. See how subtle
yeah,
this is?
but these people are yeah, but these people are very aware of all these factors. So I think they instinctively are. So then the divide and conquer strategy, right? There's so many ways that they will try to divide people, either leveraging them through irrational fears, right?
Yep.
Intimidation, a manipulation of reality, kind of restructuring, through all sorts of force or violence, right?
Yep.
If
Yep.
it, if words don't work, it always goes to violence,
Yeah.
right?
It's because it's a triangulation. They'll switch
So,
tactics. Yeah.
right, right, right. So
Mhm.
it's like you're correct in what you're saying, and maybe that's just what it's going to take. Like I guess a mutual effort and courage for people to kind of like do that together, and maybe that's what'll happen.
Well, and to keep it
I
simple,
hope so.
because you just said, okay, the
Yeah.
problem is that they're going to triangulate. I'm like, oh yes, the problem is they're going to turn out and do the doing is arriving triangle, just as I predicted. Do you see what I'm saying here? So we just have to know when people are doing the turning out, doing is arriving triangle, or the turning in, doing is building triangle.
Oh, so this is the thing, Jane. It's like so right, but then everybody then will have to make that choice, right? Like the
No,
people like
well,
ourselves who are
not
not like the
everybody.
masters, quote unquote.
Everybody has to have that choice. And since the vast majority of people are very good at doing is building, if they're not atrophied at it, the
Mhm.
overwhelming majority of humans are going to select doing as building as the primary mode that they want to work on. You will always get people that want to do doing as arriving, but there's way less of them than we think. If there were
But
any more of them,
mm,
our species would already have incinerated itself.
yes, but I feel like mentioning that. So I come from a pretty impoverished,
Yes,
and I
absolutely.
kind of know from experience from different places that those people there, the generations like and to present, what they know is essentially like slavery. They've not had the conditions to even sort of like think about things of just having to them it would be a privilege of the higher classes to have the luxury supposedly to like something that is beyond like the world right in front of you. Like I think just a lot of people are scared, like really scared to rock that doing as arriving boat, as it were,
Yeah,
because they have ingrained generational fear of what the quote unquote masters, right? And the
right.
armies that they would mobilize, the police that they use would do to them.
Yes, absolutely. So that fear, okay, so that them knowing why they have that fear is the only way
Hmm.
for them to navigate life with that fear, which is that they are afraid that they cannot stop in any way to do as build or let people know that they are. They have to do it in secret, or else these organizations will try to mobilize against them and
Torture
destroy.
them or kill them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Destroy whatever they are building, including themselves. Okay? So
Hmm.
if they've been around people that are conditioned to use doing as arriving to regulate themselves, that is very dangerous and they are correctly perceiving that. Now, what do? We
Hmm.
have things that we are building that are mass communication portals. We
Hmm.
need to tell each other that over and over
Yes.
and over again. And we need to build with each other. We need to build for them places to go where they can stop and not get attacked. We have to build places where we will not get attacked. That's tricky,
Yeah. You're right.
but it's
Yeah.
it's it has to be that way, and it has to come from people outside. You have to have
Hmm.
people who are outsiders in one culture work with outsiders in other cultures to figure out how we are going to compare notes and keep saying what the problem is the doing as arriving people is what that's what the
Yep.
problem is. That is them. It's them doing that.
Hmm.
It's and we don't know why they're like that. And if there's enough of them in control, they can terrorize people because they do not care about killing people, torturing people. They don't care. And that's it's completely rational to then not want to go anywhere near those people. That said, we now need to say, well, okay, there's an opportunity in that. If you can stay away from them, you can build, and you can practice this building in small ways, because it's about your brain. It's not about the
Yep.
world. It's about the skill in your brain. So
Hmm.
if you can get clay and just make something with clay, that is practicing the skill. And they will
Oh,
say that
and
that
this
does
is
nothing but
neuroplasticity
wrong.
too.
Yes, yes, it
Yeah.
is. Yes. So what I will say sounds a little silly at first, but it's not. Get somewhere safe. Always prioritize that. If you're being chased, get somewhere safe. I understand. But then immediately go back to doing this building.
Oh, it's like it's Jane. It's what you're describing is it's true, and it's something that I'm gonna literally like. I'll be seeing my folks and my family is very doing is arriving. Quite abusive. Has a past.
Yeah.
I've not seen them for 3 years, and I'm gonna go see my grandparents in summer. And it's as you say, like people like they said like the people who were in cults or like were in like churches and left them, right? Like the people who still remain, if you don't give them an alternative or out, they're only going to sink further because they feel like they have no other uh, direction, no other
Yes.
path that they can build, right? So I think
Yes.
that's where to provide that.
Exactly. So what it looks like to be, I can't say that. We need to build that together. So this conversation matters. So every time that we talk about it, it's better. It's every time that you and another person face inward for the doing as building triangle, where you're bringing something, I'm bringing
Hmm.
something, a third thing now exists, and we both get to walk away with our view of the third thing in our mind. And then you do that
Yep.
process again with the next person you talk to, and so will I. So yeah.
But Jane, oh my God, I have see you're right, and that is also I'll be working on what I'll be doing, but I've had a lot of experience of this, the triangulation on
Yes.
their side can, oh my God,
Yeah, it's
it can go
crazy.
crazy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Because it's self-reinforcing. The more pain they're in, the more they try to use it. So it gets really extreme.
But also just, but only like, not only is it tiresome to sometimes to try to kind of keep that bridge alive, right? To kind of get them to sort of consider these things. But then like they might even put up facades or faces where they think that they are actually like taking in your information and, they're desiring to connect with you. But then like it's, but then like they sometimes almost can't help, right? And then like when they get super sort of scared, right, they'll kind of revert to doing is arriving
Yeah, yeah,
because of comfort.
yeah. Because they're, yeah, exactly, 100%. They're trying. That is how they have learned to feel better. And what I think
Yeah.
is important is to know that and to exit when it starts to become that in any way that makes sense for
Yeah.
now. And that as we talk through this, we will have more successful tools for dealing with it. This is a new conversation about an old problem.
Who controls the media, the narratives, the dialogues? Like what the people in front of you, right? That's it. It's like what are they paying attention to? Because the things that you pay attention to is exactly what you like, well, formulates what you like, and
It's
thus
what you
formulates your perception, and thus,
kind
yeah.
of sort of it formulates what you want. So if what they show you isn't coming from a place of liking, there's not really a lot of information there. It's very shallow.
Mm,
It's very esoteric. It's
yeah.
very, the emperor has no clothes for a reason. They're so when they broadcast a more and more naked emperor, at a
Hmm.
certain point anybody watching that is going to go like, this is insane. So if so the positive thing about the instability of doing as arriving versus doing as building is that it will self-destruct and become unstable. So we don't want it to be just self-destructing and becoming unstable while everyone's stuck in it, because then incinerated species bad. Okay, but what's happening right now is they are getting so cartoonishly triangulated, it is very difficult
Mm,
to not see what they are doing. So when I say this simple model of doing as arriving, doing as building,
hmm.
this one triangle that you can use, and there are two people involved, right? Or at least two agents sharing information. It could be a symbolic
Yep.
two agent inside of yourself. It could be two agents that are united as groups, but you're having one
Hmm.
conversation. You cannot have a conversation with more than two people successfully. You have to consolidate.
No.
in some way. So all we're saying
Yeah.
is that consolidating into a conversation instead of a competition, right? So we're trying to complete a
Hmm.
conversation instead of compete with each other. Then you can see a huge contrast between the people that have run 5 million miles away from the participants in their weird triangulation dynamic. So it gets so, the scale of it is so ginormous and so ridiculous that we are able to see like there's not really something to learn from this besides the structure. So that's what I'm trying to teach people. It's like,
Hmm.
look at the structure. All of the things that they're saying at this point, like people would say it's the spectacle potentially, like going off of what's that guy? I can't remember his name. He's famous. Starts with a D. Anyways, the
Mm.
Society of the Spectacle. Oh, what is his name?
Oh, Descartes, maybe.
No, it's he's a little
No,
more
no.
recent. Hang on, let me just grab
Oh,
this real quick.
Dubois?
No, hang on. Maybe his name is David. Okay, the Spectacle. Um, Guy Debord. Guy Debord. Okay,
Oh, Debord.
so he
Hmm.
talks about the Society of the Spectacle, and that's one framework that you could talk about this doing as arriving propaganda in media. But
Bread and circus.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But the circus is getting less healthy as time goes on because nobody
More
in this,
brutal.
yeah, more brutal. Nobody likes what they're doing. They have to do it. And then it becomes like the quality goes down and the vindictiveness and violence goes up because these are now people that only got in that position by using vindictiveness, violence. So you don't like watching them anymore. You want to run away from
Hmm.
them because now they are a threat again. And we do have the doing as arriving thing for a reason. It's still there. And we're going to, like, once the threat is
Hmm.
so cartoonish, no one is going to want to like it. The only people that are going to analyze it in order, to do his build are the ones that are like, okay, well,
Yeah.
this clearly is broken and I like humans. So I look at it because I like humans and I need to rescue my
Hmm.
fellow humans from this dynamic by explaining it as well as possible so they can see it.
Hmm.
But they're
I
doing me a lot of
one
favors
thing
by
that might
making it so
help.
cartoonish. Go ahead.
We need I think maybe in this age, especially right now, like I think I watched a movie, a film. I don't know if you've heard about The Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Terry Gilliam. Time Bandits in Brazil, or another one of those trilogy. Basically, uh, counter narratives. We need counter narratives, stories, myths, because they have the potential same pull that the current narratives and myths that have a lot of influence have in order to, and we need to like spread them, like let them spread almost kind of like viruses, right,
Yeah,
through
like
these
a meme.
information technology.
Yeah.
Like a
Well,
meme. Yeah, yeah, memes. We need our memes, counter memes. Yeah.
so the counter narrative is so simple. That's what I'm going to argue. The counter narrative is just turn the persons 180 degrees to look at each other. Or if they shouldn't look at each other,
Hmm.
turn the person running away 100 and whatever degrees or 65 degrees to the thing, the person, which all things are products of people at this point that we get interested in on some level. So find the thing that they can like and turn them that direction so they can interact with the thing that they like. And ideally, they hold up a mirror and they learn to do it to themselves. So even if you just did that,
Yep.
like you're going to subvert the story of two people running away from each other and doing as arriving, or even one person running after them, but someone's doing as arriving. Just stop, hold the mirror, look at yourself. Try to figure out how to do as build with yourself. Just that. Even if people knock you over, it just like we know this story too because we have been telling the
Yep.
story of doing and building and doing as arriving over and over and over and over again because it's the fundamental metaphor of our brain.
Mm. Yeah.
So
It
that's
is.
why we need
But
to
it's also like,
remind ourselves.
hmm,
Like we forget that because we don't stop.
stop and look at ourselves. I think that's just the main thing, or rather, but it's just people think that what they'll see is something that they won't like because they're conditioned basically almost from birth to think that, well, what, they're insufficient. But I mean, they're conditioned by, right, by other narcissists or abusers to think that the thing that they should like is the narcissist and the abuser, right? Then it also makes them run away from them too.
Because you should like the narcissist or the abuser because the abuser has the stuff behind them that if you could do as build, you would need. And you don't like yourself because you don't have the stuff, right? So, but you do have the
Yep.
stuff. The stuff is building. The stuff
Yes.
is the desire to build. You may not have the things you want to build with, but you should be able to just ask for them. That is
Yeah.
where we should get with it. Is you have a sincere interest in it and you have demonstrated that there's something that you would like to stay committed to, like you have the determination and the dignity to work with this. Okay, great. We're gonna see what you bank. Here you go. Have it. Go. You know, like not go, but like stop,
You're right.
stop and work on it. So if we can just know that we don't have to make it more complicated than that, because the desire to make it more complicated is actually just a status hierarchy. It's fundamental,
Hmm.
and the most stable thing we can do at this point is to stop and look and talk to each other about what we're seeing. So we're doing that
Yeah.
right now. So we are actually doing the right thing right now. And if you can tap into the good
Hmm.
feeling of that, that is the thing you need to get really good at getting your regulation from.
Staying present, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
with other people and potentially yourself, but staying present with building. You have to stop, focus on building, and even just observing is a kind of building. And
Uh-huh.
don't just notice that it feels really different to the doing as arriving thing. And if you're autistic, it's you're a little bit ahead of the game, in my opinion. The game, you're a little bit more developed at noticing there's a distinct feeling
Mm.
potentially. So just say like this feeling is real, even if my society doesn't reward it yet. Like
Mm.
it is its own reward, and eventually society must begin to reward that, not arriving.
Um, it's funny, Jane. So like building, right? Good. It's a good analogy, but I almost sort of like see in my almost preconception. I also see it as build, but I also would say like doing is flowing. Like I feel like it's also like it's a very flowy way as well in some ways in life. You're not too
Yeah,
perturbed
yeah, no,
of needing
totally.
to arrive somewhere.
I use build because I think about our hands. So the split
Hmm.
is not everybody ambulates with their legs, not everybody builds with their hands, but we have a species that uses eyes, uses feet, legs, and uses arms and hands. So I'm just trying to say, stop moving, use hands, right?
Hmm.
But I also mean think, and I also mean all the other ways that you interact with something. And an interaction like flow
Mm.
state is brought up with that. So if there's a quality to it that resonates with how you describe the feeling of doing that, great, perfect. There's so many words we need to describe it. So that's makes sense as one way to like talk about what it feels like to do this. It's you will always want to keep moving, okay? Like as humans, we just do. But you don't have to move your body through space. You have to move your constructive uh, faculties around a thing.
Maybe this analogy will help. It's something that I saw today. It's like so a lot of people maybe in the doing is they have a goal. They see a goal and like, obviously they want to arrive there as possible to alleviate pain of not having the goal. So they'll try to chart a beeline, a straight path, right?
Yeah.
But the straight path can like destroy you and break you because like you're smashing through walls and obstacles and other things together potentially, depending on like how much you can tolerate avoiding and swerving to not hit those things. And obviously then some people would build a whole ass train and just break through everything to get there. But then I think like a lot of what neurodivergent people do, and when I say doing is flowing, my idea of flow comes from like Taoism, like the Tao, and then also kind of like other sorts of like I think a lot of neurodivergent people would say that their lives are very non-linear, right? They meander like a river, they form around different eddies and like the things in their life, and they build around these things. Sometimes they get sort of sidetracked, tangented, right? But eventually they get to where they need to be, like the river eventually reaches the mouth, right, of the ocean or whatever.
Well, they're so I would
Maybe.
argue they're so nonlinear. So a river is still linear, right? It has one direction that it goes towards. It,
Well,
it
well by gravity. It's gravity is determines its direction.
mhm. So but it's moving. So the reason why I don't like the river, it's still moving through a landscape. So I'm trying to get us away from moving through a landscape. That's just a given. We don't need any more emphasis on moving through a landscape. What you
But here's the thing though, Jane, right? The river water itself has no conscious will or movement. Would you not say that in your own life, or I wonder if other people in the chat, because I can't see it, it's like, has your life not progressed along this idea of like the path of least resistance? So like your likes, were they not always things that you gravitated towards? Like they were the easiest things to move to, and you keep coming back to them because you
Not
gravitate towards them.
necessarily. So sometimes they were the
Uh-huh.
hardest things to move to, but they were the most meaning dense. And I care about the most
Uh-huh.
meaning dense thing because that is the only way that I'm going to understand the vast majority of confusing things since I'm missing a lot of context. So I actually pursued very difficult things, possibly the most difficult things I was very bad at because they were clearly very meaning
Hmm.
dense.
But then Jane, see, the funny thing is maybe my analogy still applies, maybe it doesn't, because technically that would have been, if you think about it, your easy path. Like your path of least resistance is having done that quote unquote difficult thing, because it's like, by whose perception is it difficult,
Well,
right?
I don't, I, okay. If it is difficult, that is somewhat irrelevant to me, is what I'm going to argue. So, with the analogy of the river, the problem with the river
Hmm.
is the water is not going to change. It might like pick up some rocks or something through like the erosion
Hmm.
passing. So the substance inside of the water, the fish inside of the water, that's changing not because the river changed it. There's no how do I put this? There's no stopping thinking about it and becoming a new kind of river. So what humans can do, which is really
Hmm.
weird, is unlike a river, we can stop our body, turn our focus, and pick something up. And now it's integrated into us in some way, even if it's just for a moment. But if I pick up a pair of
Right.
ballet shoes and then I put them on for 20 years, now that's integrated into me. So,
Hmm.
in that way, what I would say is a problem with the river and like water is an interesting thing because like I prefer like the be like water, my friend. You can pour water into a cup and it becomes the cup, like what Bruce Lee
Yes.
talks about, right? So if you feel there's a uh, viscosity, there's like a formlessness that allows something to be expressed in multiple ways. Yes, the river water could be taken out of the river and put in a jar of all kinds of shapes. The river water can take on a new function, and that's what
Hmm.
I'm talking about. So it's if you
Hmm.
it what I'm saying is that
I
you
think it's
have
maybe also what I was talking about as well, because flow, technically, it is the river that flows, right? The landscape around it is the boundaries, perhaps, like the limitations that it can flow
so
by.
the
Yeah.
river flows because of time and gravity and stuff like that, right? And so do we.
Hmm.
And the thing is that we don't have to go faster or slower. It's just going to go, right? So you don't try to make
Yeah,
the
yeah.
river go faster or slower. When we do as
No.
arrive, we try to be a river that controls its tempo and sends one of our little boats faster than the other little boats.
Right, we would make a canal, like we try to build like a straight canal or something, get
Exactly.
there faster.
Exactly. So the way to live through life is, let me think about the best way to put this, is to focus much more on when you've stopped moving than moving because moving is a given. We can't seem to stop time. We can't stop our
Hmm.
aging. We can't stop all these biological functions that may be ticking time bombs or, you know, delightful surprises waiting to happen. We don't have control over that. We can
No,
control how we pay attention to it, which is very interesting. So that's what I'm talking. The river is not watching itself as far as we know, right? Like it's
I
not.
agree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Because
that's
because
what.
then like so the benefit to slowness, then it's like you highlighted something that I read, which is when you stop moving, when you are actually proceeding or perceiving at a very slow rhythm, you see more details.
Yes.
Well, I guess similar to if you're on a boat in a river and then you stop at a meander, right? As you're floating by, similar to when you're on a train, it's harder to pick up individual details while it's moving. But then if it's stopped, obviously you can see clearly what's around you, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yes, exactly. And then if you think so, if you're observing something slowly, you have told me you haven't left yet. You are still with it. So you
Yeah.
can think of slowing down as also not leaving the thing. You haven't left the thing that I would say you're building. The
Mm.
need to worry about that. You need to build a boat where you can build things even if you are on the river of time. That's fine. And then when the river of time takes you to places, yeah, you may have built things in your boat that will help you. So that's why I'm saying, like, in my
Mm.
career right now, I feel like I've been an arrow building itself mid-flight towards a target that has been building itself as well. And I'm about to hit a bullseye. And I didn't know
Yes.
that was going to happen. But I was building,
Hell yeah.
and then the time is a given. Also, hi, waxing. Oh my goodness, hello. Seems to me I love when waxing is a philosopher, like
Hey,
in a
hey.
university. It seems to me like the way
Oh.
the water responds to gravity can be helpful, but it's not the kind of thing Jane is on about. Yes, exactly. Maybe an automation would respond like a river. Automaton. Sorry. Maybe an automaton. Okay. Maybe an automaton would respond like a river, but someone who lives with deliberate intention doesn't. Yeah, exactly. You're totally picking up. Waxing. I've been explaining like the problem of the human brain and motivation splits, and that like I think we can make it more fundamental to break people out of the catastrophic doom spiral humanity is broadly in and has been for a long time. So I've been simplifying it and simplifying it, and now I'm using embodied cognition and some of like Lakoff's metaphors and the idea of all of our abstract ideas are built on physical embodied concepts that we learn very early on because we're just wiggly worms that move around, eat and poop, right? So my whole thing is that there's doing as in building and there's doing as in arriving. And when we say I want to do something, we don't differentiate. Another way we can differentiate that is to say do as in like a due date, DUE is the arrive. And then the final piece that I've been really working on is it's a triangle. And there's two kinds of triangles. One is you have two agents, they look in towards each other, and by looking at each other and with trust and honesty, sharing what they see and what they have seen. So I'm looking at you and giving you feedback. You're looking at me, giving me feedback. I'm telling you what's in my memory from where I came from. You're telling me what's in your memory from what you came from. I'm looking behind you for safety. So you're looking behind me. So we have 360-degree panoramic safety while we work on this third thing, right? So we complete the triangle by relating versus turning away from each other towards the goal. And then you have the doing as arriving thing. I explained this pretty well in a TikTok, but basically like this creates the conditions then for triangulation, right? And then it's manipulation, trying to go to a goal. And we've made it so that people get to the goal, they get a trophy, then they're given stuff that if they had ever worked on doing as building, they would know how to build with, but they don't because at this point, the competitiveness is so extreme that only people that are abusive can arrive. They have to kick people out of the way who are arrivers. They used to run over people who are doing as builders, but now they're so far away from us that we're like, wow, guys. So they aren't even trying to mess up our stuff anymore. I can go to a library at a major university and probably walk out with half the books and no one's going to stop me because no one cares. you know, that's how I've educated myself. Um, and so the whole idea here is that we need to tell them there's a difference between wanting and liking. And there's a good feeling of stopping to like something, and they've been addicted to the regulating their nervous system, their affect, their pain, with the also in its own way good feeling of going. Like they're basically doing pain relief through adrenaline racing, running for the finish line, kicking, screaming on their way, as opposed to safely meeting in a place, even with just yourself, and having insight in, look in, and see.
Oh yeah, isn't it that a lot of people say, Jane, that like like they're like, oh, I don't want to. I get bored, or I'm afraid like of like listening to my thoughts when I stop like moving, right? If I don't have like some stimulation, like I go crazy. Like a lot of these sentiments are very common, apparently.
Can you repeat that one more time so I can process it a little better?
Yep. So like I have a lot of people, some friends of mine that I think of who are quite like very, I guess, doing as a Rivey, or they're very like stimulant chasing.
Mm-hmm.
And they will say things like, I can't sit still. Like if I sit still, if I just sit like in rest or in silence, like then I start freaking out. I get bored, or it's like then I have to sit with my thoughts, and that makes me really uncomfortable
Well, and
and things like
what
that.
should help people is, oh, the wind blew. Oh my gosh, I just explained everything in waxing vanish. Okay, all right, it's okay. I'll explain it again. But uh when people say I can't sit still, what they need to know is you don't have to sit still. You just have to circle
You have to
one
be
thing.
still.
Well, you don't even have to be still. That's the thing. You either
Oh.
you need a focal point that you orbit. So you don't even have to sit still. You can orbit
Mm.
360 degrees, but stay with the thing or the person. Don't leave.
I think people do that instinctively. It's just that they tend to circle around not the healthiest stuff, right?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that my concern is they're not good at feeling the good feeling of circling. My concern is that they circle for a minute, then they've lost it, and they're back to doing as arriving because that they started to become okay. So the problem with doing this building, which I've tried to explain because I had to study ballet. Sometimes studying ballet, I was sobbing, like I was in so much pain because I looked at what I was doing and I looked at my understanding of what I should be doing, and I'm like, oh, I am nowhere near that. That sucks, but it wasn't in an arrival way. Okay, so if
Hmm.
I thought of that as arrival pain and time to jump on the arrival track, I would be in trouble because what I needed to do was stay with my body and work on it a little bit longer, work on it again, work on it again, work on it again. Oh, I'm too amped up, I can't work on it. Take a break so I can work on it again. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to come back to it. I'm going to come back to it. So if you don't know that that feeling is a cue to come back to it, and you think it's a feeling to run away from it, now you're doing as arriving. So you have to tell people that the stopping, and this is that
Hmm.
valence arousal thing, this is basic mood, the stopping,
Hmm.
when the pleasantness goes down, you will get depressed and tired. You will
Yes.
feel a kind of pain that is not awesome. But that is what
Hmm.
pain is for. It's to tell you what to do. And sometimes the pain is like, oh, I have to go do something about this. Continue to do that. But the thing that autism gives us potentially is a way to not be motivated by external cues to go somewhere.
Yes.
So it can sound complicated, but if I say this enough times, you'll see how fundamental it really is. So so
No, I really feel that you're extremely right, because kind of how I live. But then even on I would argue that for me on the flip, I would say the way that I see it is I'm very inculcated in like the way of doing is building. But then I also kind of like build to the point of like I feel like sometimes I need to rest from building itself as well, and sometimes I push far too far to the point of like I get consumed by it.
yes.
I don't know, maybe.
Well, and consumed in what way? Can you explain what that feels like?
It's like, I like building. The things that I like, I want to keep doing them. I would do them forever, and I would
Yes,
circle around them forever, so far as I see. But
correct.
like sometimes it can be, hey, Watson, it can just be like to the point of like building. The things that I like, I want to keep doing them. I would do them forever, and I would circle
Oh, do
around
I
them
have a little
forever. So
bit of echo?
a bit of a offset echo as well. That's cool.
That's kind of fun.
I know, we're good, we're good.
Hi, waxing.
Oh,
Is that waxing
I
audio?
believe so.
Okay.
It should, yeah, I probably was doing an echo, but maybe it's gone now.
I think it's
No,
gone.
you're good, waxing. Yeah, you're
Perfect.
good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Oh, I'll just finish that thought of mine. Like, yeah, I would do, but like sometimes I just feel
Wait, there we
like,
go.
oh, I hear you.
Kind of, maybe.
Yeah.
Can you
Perfect.
hear us?
Wait, can you hear us?
Maybe waxing can hear. I don't think waxing hears us.
Oh no. Probably audio settings need a little tweak.
Hey, I can
Let
hear
me-
you now.
Yay!
Oh, you can hear us now. Okay.
Hello!
Okay. Am I still creating an echo?
No.
No, no.
Okay, good. Hey, very good.
Hello!
Hey, welcome. Hey, hi, everybody.
Hi!
Hey.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. I
Oh,
know Jane. Who's the other guest? Who am I talking to?
Oh,
that
this
would be
is
myself.
yeah, Bright Spears. So Bright Spears has been part of for a while now the Housekeep-a-thon
Millennia.
stream. Yeah, and they're part of the Discord as well, and have been contributing to these discussions about autism and just like I don't know, working on the nitty gritty of how we relate to the world, so we can start to integrate these ideas into our lives that would help us to manage better, but then ultimately save the species.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you, Bright Spear.
Likewise, Waxing. I just realized something, Jane. I thought that I was taking breaks from building, but no, actually, I was still building when I thought I was taking breaks from building. Because if I'm like, I'm gonna stop building, I don't know, on this book project, because I need to go like take like a breather or a nap or eat some food to keep my body. Oh, I'm just still building there, just in different directions,
Yeah,
right?
yes, that's the rhythm of building, which I think can feel like a flow because now you're responding to yourself as a builder too, right? Like we as humans have certain limitations and they're specific to us as well as general. We don't have great insight
Hmm.
into them because we have all these doing as arrivers telling us what humans are. And they're just like, you're weak and I'm strong and I'm going to kick you in the teeth. And I'm like, okay, buddy.
Oh,
Yeah, it's its
oh,
own
so
meditation on that.
just I'll mention a final point. So this makes me, because I was thinking to myself, like, if it's like a muscle too, like, oh, then what purpose does the arriving bit sort of give? And maybe there's evolutionary things, but for me personally, I just realized even I, to some degree, need to give myself like a sort of like a narrow structure to my life to a very small degree, so that like I kind of almost co-create my own reality. I don't know if that makes sense, but I've noticed that like the things that I've sort of created for myself, like almost narratively speaking, I do sort of like end up embodying or building. But often I tend to be very skeptical and very careful not to create narratives and stories for myself where I could be deluding myself from what actually is reality in front of me. And I think that that is arriving. I am doing is some way, but I always actively refine the like that goal, quote unquote, and I only ever have like the one goal in my life, in a sense.
I'll say
So yeah.
socially arriving is just a part of how our bodies move, so we have to some extent. The
Mhm.
insights we have about how other people are doing that process will be altered, in my opinion, if your grid cells are altered. And I think that's how the change happens in autism, where we don't
Mhm.
develop this doing as arriving sense, like almost like sixth sense that they have. But so the simplest way to say it is that you do as arrive so that you can be at the right place at the right time,
Mhm.
which will be important
Right.
sometimes, right? However, the doing as building is more about the right thing. And the right thing, if you really build it, might mean you are not going to be at the right place at the right time. So this is the
Yeah.
contrast that I've started to have between a do thing like DUE due date and do thing like I'm going to build. So we don't have
Mhm.
language to separate these processes because we haven't had the insight about this crystallize yet. But I mean, there's you can see. I mean, obviously, in every philosophical tradition, there's some indications of this. I'm just trying to say that it's fundamental to our motion as ambulatory beings that also are tool creating beings.
Yeah.
Well, when we're talking about conceptions of right place, right time, right do, um, how how do we qualify that?
Hmm.
Right by what standards? Are we meeting our own standards, or are we meeting society standards,
Right.
or
Well, the right place and the right time is an agreement between you and other people. And even if you've sort of simulated an other person inside of yourself, like this feels right to me to go here at this time, you're still sort of saying like I'm coordinating and meeting something here, meeting my destiny.
Yeah.
So there's a sense
I
that
see.
you're yeah. So ideally the do as arrive instinct can help us to do as build with the right people or the right circumstances. But when it gets coordinated and just becomes the hit that our brain gets for arriving in a place, we have a problem. And I think what happens with autism is the arriving reward is all borked because we don't have a good sense of the three-dimensional grid. And that's what social skills are actually an extension of, is understanding there's three-dimensional space, there's objects in it, they're moving, and I need to know where they are. That we have a problem with that. And to fix that, we focus on specific landmarks using our place cells in our brain to say, well, this is a very stable object in the environment. Why is it stable? Oh, let me infer some things about the kind of environment, which gives us some inferences about the movement of things. But we would have a much harder time showing up at the right place at the right time. But we might get really good at building such a good thing, doing such a good thing, that if we show up at the slightly right time, slightly wrong place, people will still appreciate it. So
because we're more equipped, we've built more things, right?
we built something that's successful. We built and stable. And like ultimately the healthiest things are going to be stable things that don't hurt us or do something unpredictable. So autistic people move unpredictably because we don't have the context of right place and right time as a normal person does. But I think they're excessively using it.
Agreed. Jane, all these ideas, by the way, I'd really actually, just quickly to say, I'd really enjoy if you were to formulate them all in like a document, just even to keep for my own record. Would really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm working on hopefully a little book.
Sweet.
That would be a good read. Yeah, I'm still just processing a lot of this stuff. So that's why I don't have a lot of input to add. Is you guys have probably all been talking about this and have been bantering about these ideas for quite some time. And I haven't been here, so I'm still just getting exposed to them.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the way it is. Like basically you've met us here, right? And I'm like, here's the thing we've been working on, and you're circling it now. And you have all of this other stuff in your mind that's making third things. And that's what's so exciting. If we understand this process is very physical, and that we use the physical metaphor of turning in together to orbit, and that you have like an orbital pathway that I can't even do. Like you defy my physics and can go 100 degrees northwest and backwards from me. I'm like, what do you see from there? Because I can't even get there. And that's what's so cool about this is it's something that if we can do a little bit of like three-dimensional imagination to situate what this model is, it's really easy to get back into it.
I think that makes sense. It tracks. The gravity analogy I think works pretty well in proximal orbits because we'll pass each other in close enough proximity anyway, and then enter back into our own orbits. It really, I love the analogy. I love it.
I'll share that sort of like write-up that I did on like the brain is like a star and things like that, because I do feel like there is something to it, like the movements of the earth themselves like are sat within the framework of the solar system, and that in itself is in the framework of the galaxy, and then so on.
Right.
Commonalities, right?
And then if we think of things as like orbits, instead of just like an orbit, even if you orbited the Earth, you would feel like you're just running a really dumb long race to a finish line that's way too far away, right? So if we look in the direction we're going, we are only going to catch what's in front of us and we'll miss everything behind us. I'm saying if we just take the orbit for granted and look at our feet, like look down, like what are you on top of? That's where we're going to do our best work. And that because time is going to like take us like a conveyor belt around, we can actually plop down on our butt, grab stuff as it comes by and just sit and work on it.
Well, and this is kind of like the idea of mindfulness, like Buddhist mindfulness, right? Where it's not a rejection of the past or a rejection of the future. It's a kind of a deliberate disassociation from the past and future to be really present in the now, in the here, in the physical, where you are, what you're feeling, how you are.
Yeah, and the backfilling of our past experiences and even you could think of imagination and memory as continuous, like that it's sort of the same process. And some people in neuroscience are arguing that it is. So like your
Mm.
imagination is just like future remembering. um, so if you realize
That
that
seems to
all
be true.
right, like all
Yeah.
of that is backfilling in every interaction you're having in the present moment, you're never really separate from it anyway. But what you're allowing
Right.
yourself to do is have that integrate with what I call doing is building, or like integrate with the things in front of you getting to be focused on, and the backfilling in changes your focus anyway, and you can just allow it.
Right. Well, I see what you're saying, but also I think that there's how do you say it? There's a bridge back and forth between the deliberate doing forward and how that will retranslate our interpretation of our own past.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Where well, I'll have to think about it. I'll have to think about that.
Let me offer you, I know what you're talking about, I think. And so let me offer you two tools that I help to model that. So one thing is we are able to zoom out and orbit our orbit. So if I understand that the meaning is getting more meaningful because the things that happened in my past and the things that are happening now are actually creating their own internal logic, that's giving me more insight into how things work, right? So as I learn new things, the things I already learned now have a new meaning. And it's,
Right.
yeah. So one way I thought of thinking about that, this isn't perfect, but it gets you kind of into the mode. If you had a resin filled straw, and that's linear time,
Uh-huh.
what we're trying to do is allow things to be embedded in linear time, but the resin is clear, the objects are embedded. We can even have projected objects that we think are there, but we're not sure if they happened or not. And then we turn the straw to look down it, and we see it all.
I see. You see it as one picture.
Yes.
Uh,
A tapestry, in a sense.
And you may need to look down at different slices sometimes to better understand. But if you went into the middle, let's say we had a
Context.
recorded history. Yes,
Hmm.
a recorded history, and we went to this slice, and from what's recorded, we can't really see some stuff because it gets obscured. Okay, I'm going to look down and I'm going to look up, and then I'm going to fill in.
here's I'm sorry to interrupt, but here's a point of conflict that I see with the analogy. I'm following the analogy. I think it's fantastic. The problem with turning the straw to look down it to see everything within the whole is that wherever you are relative along the straw,
Mhm.
everything forward is necessarily more clear
Yes.
than everything behind.
Right.
Because your forward directedness is towards the material world to create a new tomorrow. Your yesterday is more relative to that world that you're trying to build for tomorrow today. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
one side of the straw is going to be increasingly more real and more clear to us. The backside will be increasingly more vague and what's the word? It becomes more dynamic and more plastic. It becomes more pliable for potential futures.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Well, and then the tricky thing, right? So if we think of this as like kind of a spectrum of perception over our life, or like we are each a straw. My straw can intersect with other people's straws at a different angle, at a different place, and they can loop back around. They could spiral. Like the straw doesn't have to be straight, technically, but we're
Right.
allowing for the straightness just to get the sense of being able to look on a vector. But the straw could also be wider or narrower. It could have better or worse opacity. Like so there's all of these variables of like how we can have access to information, But I like the straw just to get you to the idea of like the information is there, and because we appreciate linear time, we've collapsed it into this narrative form of like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But there's
Yes, we
another,
must.
yeah, we must, exactly. But there's another cognitive process that I'm trying to get people to notice they're doing, which I'm calling doing is building. And I came up with an acronym to help them to think about this, which I like better than just using the straw, because the straw has some flaws, which I completely agree. But basically, what you're trying to say is, I call it NOAD, NOAD. There's a new thing or new things. I'm going to look at that. Then I'm going to let the backlog of the old things resurface, and they'll surface randomly depending on what new things I'm around. There's all these cues of what will get retrieved that are outside of my control, but I'm just going to notice that process. Then I'm going to do a synthesis, which lots of philosophical traditions encourage,
Right.
like in all things. And then I'm
Mhm.
going to let myself be motivated by that. So now that I've done new things, old things, all things, I have a do things. And I'm more likely to do as in build at that point than just get locked back into doing as a writing, where I'm trying to say, well, the next thing I should do, the next step I should take based on the narrative that I've memorized is this. So instead of following what I've been prescribed to do, I'm checking to see the models that I've built and what makes sense according to the logic of the model for me to be motivated to do. So it allows you to think more critically, and it allows you to
Okay.
also possibly be critical of your own thinking process. Like you can say, okay, if I'm going to take this next action, does it make sense with everything that I knew before about actions, period? You can get a little bit better at
Right.
metacognition. And I'm trying to guide people to that, which is stopping and working on it, because we keep shooting through this straw. We keep going. Time is not on our side in that way. And our society has given us a lot of materials and words that lock us into looking for the reward from the doing as arriving pathway. If I'm correct that this is an architectural feature of our brain, and one feels very different than the other, and that autistic people, we mostly feel doing as building satisfaction and joy, and not doing as arriving. We just feel anxiety around that because our brains haven't like fundamentally developed to process that kind of reward, which is social hierarchies and stuff like
I
that.
feel like mentioning something to add to that almost. I feel it might be important. In this game in Elden Ring, right? There's these two laws, these two universal concepts, right? That they talk about: the law of causality and regression. And they talk about how they sort of govern the meanings, the connections between things, right? The law of regression is the whole it's the singular pull between all meanings converging, right, into like the one singularity of the universe, right? And then the causality, the law of causality is like individual connections between separate instances, right? Like on a matrix grid, like different like points and coordinates. And then like the regression side would be kind of like the median sort of line that kind of is at the middle of all things, charting the trajectory of where it's going. So like, would it be true that maybe the way you're describing Shane, kind of really get into that doing is arriving? It sounds more like the regression side of things. They're trying to get to that like quickest median pull to get to that complete pull of meaning, right? Back to that singularity, back to the oneness of things. Whereas maybe we kind of perhaps lean more on the causality stuff and sort of we see minute connections between things.
Well,
Or I don't
the
know, the
okay,
outliers.
so this is what I think is interesting. So the singularity kind of doesn't make sense to me because then there's nobody to observe it. So if it went to a singularity, then nothing would exist because there'd be nothing to say that it exists. So we,
True.
I think, are in a universe of increasing complexity so that one thing existing has multiple dimensions, and therefore, in order for its existence to be proved, it needs to be looked at, observed from as many dimensions as possible. And that observation
Mhm.
apparently creates a third point that's the synthesis of the observer and the observed. And since all of us as humans seem to be both, we've created a super complex math situation of like extending meaning out constantly, and I don't know why it would stop. So me personally, I think it's an expansive universe. I don't know
No,
why it
I'm
would
not saying that
ever.
it would stop
Yeah.
necessarily in the singularity. It's just more that, like, technically all things could be conjoined in theory, right? So, like,
Well, but I
Well,
mean,
what if we think about rather than think of these two things as diametrically opposed, what if we think of them as different sides of a scale which we oscillate back and forth between, some kind
Hmm.
of singularity and some kind of plurality that's constantly waving back and forth?
right. I'd be more inclined for that.
Does that resolve some of the issues?
Yeah, that does. That does. And that works for me because that can be an expression of time itself. That like there's a oscillation
Right.
between plurality to allow for observation and then just being. And that if our species is to be healthy, I would suggest we need to spend more time looking at each other. And if we try to just be, the problem is that we have a linear relationship to time. So we end up in different places even if we don't try to move because our cells keep moving and everything keeps moving and changing
Right.
position. So the change of positionality as we experience it as a species is the given. Does the universe want that force to be permanent? I'm dubious about that a little bit, but my inclination is that because of the observer phenomenon also being possible sentience, then you have to ask, well, is the universe sentience? And then I think your uh, your idea resolves the conflict. Like it just says like, oh, it just oscillates.
Well, there are a few ways that we can explain this without a sentient universe, but it requires an idea of, I guess we would be appealing to Leibniz's monad theory, where there are a bunch of consciousness. You are a constituting consciousness. When you look at a chair, your time and place is part of what situate that object in the world in its time and place. When you look away, if nobody else is in the room, the relative location of that chair in real space time is debatable.
The tree
Is
falling in the forest,
imaginary,
right?
It's
actually.
Yeah.
indeterminate. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's in. So when we have multiple consciousnesses that are looking at each other, they form a kind of constitutionality by their seeing each other, by merely being
Yes.
within proximity.
Yes, yes, yes. And that so that is why I like this triangle thing because I'm giving that third thing its own like existence that we can at least abstractly appreciate that we're looking at each
Right.
other, we're doing that process, a third thing is made, and it works for me too because the interesting thing of the geometry, the grid cells in your brain, they call it a grid, but it's actually like triangles creating like a hexa
Yeah.
whatever yeah, so you're pinging in this triangular pattern already neurologically, which is very interesting to me. And when we think about like the way you could curve or bend that, you can make spheres out of that, you can make orbits out of that, and the relationships are
Spirals.
bisected in all of these different angles, and they could be super dense, like so every slice is this from every angle, like these triangular spheres. So we can have like a tessellated or like a fractal universe that way. And so then we can guess that there's some properties, and maybe not consciousness, but this third thing in the rest of the universe, and that like when humans think this way, it can also give us some sort of like spiritual resolution, which we do want. But the problem I see with the doing is arriving, where people will pretend to have this third thing relationship with God, right? So they'll say, well, I'm turning in to look at someone, but that someone is God, and I must be great indeed to see all the way out to God, and God seeing to me and telling me what to say and do. So I'm going to tell you what to do. So people can have this longing to have this inward insight dynamic that I think is building or turning into the triangle. But then they'll listen to people that are using a facade of that to ultimately control their behavior in a doing as a writing way. Don't get near my stuff and my $500 yacht. I am your pastor.
Right, right.
Because they can set the
Well, I think
rules.
that there's always a mistake in deifying any kind of anything that we don't understand. You know, when we look at the world and we wonder, we should wonder, but we should never deify it as a principle. And I don't know what we can do to protect against that other than to advocate for a kind of materialism where we recognize that the world is what it is and that we shouldn't anthropomorphize things that we don't understand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that we might anthropomorphizing is fun for me to think about lately. So we have forward facing eyeballs and a mouth and we see eyeballs and mouths everywhere, and I think it's so cute because we're like, will you tell me things? I'm trying to look for someone to look at and tell things and do the triangle with, right? I think that's what we're doing. um but we
As
also,
children do.
yeah, we
Yeah.
also might kind of have a pseudo relationship with things, and anthropomorphizing allows us to practice that skill of sharing our insights and
Right,
caring
because
about.
don't they create like a phantasmal echo in our brain, in our imagination, or
Yeah, yeah,
with
and
the thing
I
that's
think
because you're not always in contact with it. You memorize it. You remember it in places when you don't connect with it.
right,
Right.
and I think even potentially this would explain why philosophically we've created splits of, and even unfortunately misogynistically, splits of intuition and logic, like they're fighting with each other inside of ourselves. I think there's like a subconscious maybe, or there's like a unfinished processing of something, and we'll call that our intuition. But we're giving ourselves feedback, and you could even do like the systems one, systems two thing, like thinking fast, thinking slow with this potentially. But I think it's more complicated. But anyways, but all that to say, we're looking into ourselves and we're saying, okay, I've noticed something, I don't know why. Should I pay attention to this? And now we've started that triangle in with ourselves. And I think that's super important, and we have to be able to trust ourselves in that process in order to trust other people, because we will be more confident if we've had experiences of using this mode of thought. And then I think we'll get better at knowing when
Oh, absolutely.
somebody's you know, something not to anthropomorphize in that way.
Yeah, I think that there's that just made me think that there's so much more advantage to this than I'd realized. Clearly, there's a lot of advantage thinking about your process of judgment, and I think that you are really very on the nose at looking at exactly where you are. This point of inflection, not inflection, that's not the right word, but this point of um, contrast between where you are and where you're going, and that deliberate change in thinking about this is as arriving. And where was I going with this? Oh, the confidence, building the confidence. I think that there is when we learn to do a skill, we're usually not very good at it, and sometimes we don't understand that the skill that we've developed as we're developing it, something that develops organically, and then we realize this is a coping mechanism that I've developed to control my environment, coping mechanism that I've used to protect myself. But I think that for many neurotypical people, I'm going to make some sweeping judgments here. They get a habit. They establish a habit of making certain kinds of judgments and decisions that they just fall into. And they don't think very deliberately. I see this all the time in the classroom, where students don't think about the question that I've asked. They respond in almost a knee-jerk reaction kind of way. And I think that's the kind of, I think that you're right for drawing attention to exactly this kind of thing.
Right, because I think what's happened, and it's getting more exaggerated because of the systems putting certain people who appreciate these standards being so set in stone that we're going to do is arrive, we're not going to do is build. We have more people who are cartoonishly underdeveloped at doing is building. So I have a lot of like embodied metaphors to help people to understand the conflict, because there is a real conflict here. If I'm on a beach building sandcastles and 20 people have decided they're going to have 20 different relay races on this beach, they're going to run over my sandcastle. And I'm going to think they're in the way of me building, and they're going to think I'm in the way of their race. And the problem is the people that enjoy the race can become very sadistic people because they will knock over sandcastles, they'll kick the competition. It's much more efficient to just bop them in the head and get them out of the way. So we're starting to see this dynamic create cartoonishly malformed people. But if you're trying to protect yourself, it can make sense to just run, especially when they say, well, when you get to the finish line, then you'll be able to start build. You'll start to get the materials to build your sandcastle, but then you never get any practice building, and you don't realize there's a good specific feeling to building that you need to get good at honing and listening to in order to be a skilled craftsperson. So that process requires mentorship. It requires a sanctuary where you're safe to build. And the nice thing about what society is doing is because they're so accelerated in this race and so cartoonishly exaggerated, they have left the libraries unattended. So you can just break in, no one will stop you. And if you want to practice building, you can get very into that skill. You still need to find mentors. You still have to find safety. You still have to do all this. So this isn't a universal across the globe, but there's a lot of people that were outsiders, and people felt so satisfied that they're not going to be competing in our race, that they didn't realize these outsiders are just watching the race and taking notes, and then taking the notes and reading books and finding mentors in books. And then they build a little model of what they think you guys are doing. And eventually we're going to have their number. So this is just my little mathematical contribution to this, because I was enough intersections of an outsider. To be able to, like, I just wasn't ever going to be invited to participate in any race seriously. So I was like, okay, well, are any of these fun? I'll just circle the whole track. And like hurting each other. This isn't fun. And they're lying about being good at building because I had to talk to builders to analyze you guys. So it's sowing the seeds of its own demise, and hopefully not destructively. But that's what I'm
It's like
tapping
when you're in
into.
the middle of yeah, when you're in the middle of arriving to the thing that you're doing or whatever, it's like, yeah, you're not cognizant, you're not giving yourself the time or awareness, slowness, right, to think about why and what affects it,
Yeah, you can't, because
right?
then everyone will tell
It's
you
like,
you're falling behind. Like, how many times have people told me, well, you need
yeah,
to stop what you're doing. You need to get up and go over here, or else everyone's going to
you're
beat
missing
you.
out.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure I'm not missing out, because have you seen the shape those guys are in? Like, they don't look so hot.
but it's all about that moment of glory, right?
Yeah, because they're
That
in pain.
it's almost
They're
like, yeah,
in.
they're looking for, yeah, addicts.
I can't. I mean, if you've been running in this race for this long, and you've been sustaining injuries, and you've never sat down to be
Some cost.
embodied, yeah, yeah, but it's not cost, and it's like, what are you gonna do? Like, who's gonna help you? You surrounded yourself. There's no medics on the field. You're surrounded by other people that are gonna kick you if you tell them that you've been hurt, because now you're weak. So what are you gonna do?
Right.
Like, yeah,
You're just supposed to keep running.
right, right. So then it increeses my
I
empathy
just,
for the problem too. But ultimately, like, the only way out is to tell people this is what's happening, and for them to realize that they're not going to. It's like what to get into my Discord, I have that in a ring. Like, until you conquer the fear of being an outsider you will remain. They're afraid of being left behind, and until they stop being afraid of being left behind and just let themselves be left behind, they won't understand. They'll never feel that way.
yeah. That
But
analogy with the sandcastle
they don't
and
trust
like
themselves too.
oh
That's about, I'll just add one note because it's important. They don't trust themselves to heal because the stopping and healing is the thing they haven't been doing, so they don't even know what it feels like. But go ahead.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think like you cut out. I don't know if it was just me a little bit, so I might have interjected by accident. I did want to say just a little point, but
No, please go, please go.
you were saying about like the sandcastles earlier, yeah, and like running. Folks kind of like were running about. I don't know if this like the visual that I got, whether it's helpful, right? Maybe on the idea of boundary. Um, so these people who are like doing the race, right? To me, like the visual I was getting is like a comet or a meteor, right? Usually it's kind of like launched and it has like a set sort of like trajectory that it follows, right? A path. I mean, a comet obviously technically has an elliptical path, but an asteroid's different. But basically, think about like a planet like Saturn in the solar system, right? It's ringed by hundreds of different like pieces of rock and asteroid matters and whatever, right? It's known for its rings, which then also represent like boundaries. So like it's like that planet's not really as much in danger when something comes crashing towards it because it almost sort of like sorts them out in those rings. I'm not sure exactly what point this is connecting to, but I felt like mentioning is it might potentially be useful to help with these runners so they don't break sandcastles or whatever they're trying to
Yeah,
build.
yeah. I really, really, really like Mr. Rogers because I think he was doing this. I think he was talking about this, and when he says the good feeling of self-control, I think he was talking about doing his building, and he was constantly
Mhm.
saying like attitudes are caught, not taught. And he was talking about this example where he had the kindergartners he was helping with have a sculptor come in who didn't tell them how to sculpt, but just sculpted in front of them, and the kids their
Mhm.
creativity just like shot into like the stratosphere. And never before or since had these kids been so creative with clay because they simply just were like, oh, that person really likes what they're doing. Why? And you just it's good. You're just like that's very attractive. So he had this idea of like goodness being attractive. And I think all of that he was talking about doing is building. He said look for the helpers because his mom told him to look for the helpers. So he had people in his life that understood this motivation, and possibly he was autistic. He had lots of signs of it. Possibly his mom was autistic. But I know that holistic people can do this, but they need to see it modeled, and their models right now are these doing as arriving cartoons. Like The Simpsons is our president. You know what I mean? Like it's insane.
Yep.
But they're so afraid that there's nothing else, right? And I
Outside of the inner ring.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Well, and you're tapping into a problem that exacerbates itself.
Hmm.
Um, because the people who are running the race are running away. They're running rampant and they have no direction, no idea where they're going. And so and then they have hordes of people following them,
Hmm.
stampeding behind them, which is building momentum. So it's
A
difficult to
noise.
get um,
Yeah.
yeah,
A noise is
it's
fine.
difficult to get one or a few away from that. But if you do, if you can begin to funnel people away, you'll affect that stampede. You'll affect the trajectory of that race potentially.
Yes. And the this is why I'm like the seeds of the destruction are kind of there. So what I have to tell people is, "Hi, I'm an outsider. They said that I'm far behind in the race. Look at me. Now look at you. Who is currently
Look at me,
bleeding?"
be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Who is currently bleeding to death of the two of us? Oh, it's you. Ow, ow, right? Now we're not starting a new competition where I'm the most luckiest outsider. No, I am doing something different. Would you like to stop doing that? And I'll give you some stuff that might help you to heal. And here's some other people that I've healed from. Here's these things. Now you're going to have to learn to heal yourself. Did you know your body already knows how to do that to a large degree? And then, yes, you're going to have to ask other people. Yes, you're going to have to relearn what you are. But you never got to ask, what am I? Because you just had to ask, where am I?
It sounds a bit like Plato's cave again.
Yeah, and
there's
here's
overlap with all that.
yeah, I was about to say here's where we're going to run into problems. Plato's cave is a good example because what happens to Plato when he goes back into the cave? He's attacked by the people. And this is the same thing that Malatesta was talking about when you try to tell people about liberating themselves. Instead of giving all control to the government, you should be in control of your own lives, actually. And when you tell people that they should do that, they're going to accost you because you're telling them to be responsible, to take accountability, to do the hard thing, and they don't want to.
Right. They resist the resistance.
I
They
think
have
it's
that
a lack
urge.
of confidence though. They don't want to because they don't want to tell anybody that they don't think they can. Because then they're still doing as arriving. So it's super self-reinforcing. Like they basically taught
Right.
themselves to try to pull themselves out of the finger trap. And I'm like, well, this is making it worse. Um, so what we have to do is kind of what Mr. Rogers was singing about. He's like, I can stop when I want to, can stop when I wish, can stop anytime, right? And what a good feeling to feel like this and know that the feeling is really mine. So what we have to tell them is like, so it's going to be super scary to stop. You are going to have to process this wave of stuff and pain.
Oh,
And
because the scary thing is, it's like you're a child. It's almost like you're reborn in a different world, and then the scary you're then very dependent almost again in some ways because you have to relearn,
yeah,
and like
well, you have to
try
learn that
new things.
a healthy person is interdependent, so that they're in a myth of
Yeah.
independence, right? And they have to learn that that's
Mm.
impossible, and that
Impossible. Yes.
yeah, exactly. And that there's nothing shameful about learning from other people. That's the only way we learn.
True.
But they
Yeah.
have to
I
learn
think that's
from,
exactly the right language too.
yeah.
To present it as a myth because it is. It's not just unrealistic. It's impossible.
Exactly. And so,
Yeah, becoming omniscient gods, right?
the shift is happening
Yeah.
literally right now in our little like space that we're making because I, just being female, am not supposed to be a mentor, period. Because they said God doesn't talk to women, they only talks to men, and only very special men with a pope hat. So Jane can't be part of the process of turning in. So if you even listen to
She's a
me,
devil.
right, if you even listen to me, you are practicing doing as building. And this will be true for other intersections, depending on how much someone's been excluded and you've been told that they're at the back of the race. So if you just turn to them and talk to them, you have broken this fugue.
It's dispelling the idea of sin, right? This whole, well, I mean, just good and bad
Yeah,
polarization.
yeah.
In
But
group, out group.
we kind of don't think it can be that simple, right? Because the person that's BSing all the way at the finish line is saying, "Oh, it's not that simple." I'm like, "How would you know? You've never talked to anyone. You just elbowed them or, head butted them."
Yep. But see, when I tell my people in my friend group stuff like this, right, that it's like you say these things, but have you actually tested them? Have you checked them? Have you verified them? Do you have any proof
Yes.
of that?
Yes.
Like they'll say obviously no if they do admit it, but then they won't change because they just want to live in those like emotions where they
Well,
irrationally feel.
you
Yeah.
test it. You test it by like literally stop your body, look at a thing, and then that's why I came up with the node thing. New things, old things, all things, do things. Like talk that out loud. And the next thing you do, follow from that. So think about the new thing you're looking at, think about the old things, all things, integrate that together, synthesize, and then whatever your next impulse is, follow it. Do that. And you
Right.
may move, you may do this, you may do that, but the motivation has to be different. So my argument is that there's an architectural distinction in your brain that allows you to be motivated to keep running or motivated to stop and work on something.
I think Jane, you're right. It's just I guess like waxing actually just said the point of like you're right, but then it's like neither can sort of we go to these people and tell them that's what they have to do because of that resistance to the resistance,
Right,
right?
and
That like they would have
we
to change.
can't
So it's
because
almost like yeah.
what will happen. So if we try to run after them to tell them, we're going to get super tired circling them and try. So basically what you
Yes.
they'll turn away from us. Then we have to run in front of their eyeballs again, be like, hey, we're gonna relate. That's a lot of energy. So you don't have to do it with that
Yeah,
guy.
we
Yeah.
can't do that.
Yeah, no, but we can do it with a lot more people than we think. But the invitation has to be clear. So this is why I like this triangle. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, how can I simplify this to get people into their body? I'm like, remember how your little legs ambulate you around, or if you use a wheelchair or whatever, like you move from point A to point B. Remember how you do that every single day, all the time, and you can't stop? Okay, great. You remember how you have appendages that make things, and you also kind of can't stop doing that? So what I want you to do is walk less, build more. Okay, so if I can just get people to think, oh, I can physicalize this, and my brain knows that these are different. If your brain could not
Mm.
tell that those were different, you would be in trouble and none of this would exist. So you're trying to
True.
feel how they're different in your brain. And because it's a motivation architecture, I think is what we're going to find. I'm pretty convinced you will notice one of the good feelings is about arriving, and one of the good feelings is about building. And autistics, we are really, really not happy people when everything's about arriving, because that reward pathway is all kind of busted in us, and we've probably never had a good hit of it. Or if we had, it's very, very altered. So on the one hand, if you have a difference in your brain that cuts you off from that, we're surprisingly functional. I think if somebody didn't have doing as arriving, I don't think I don't even think our human brains can do that. I think brains are guarded against that because it's more important for us to move than anything else. Like all else fails, if we can at least roll out of the way, that's something.
Well, the body needs to retain temperature and kinetic momentum, right?
Yeah, and on,
And
on
stuff like
some
that.
level, our body is repairing itself, and we're not going to interrupt the repair process without, some major problems happening.
Yeah.
Like lots of things will even repair while you're dying. So so
Hmm.
so we just need to facilitate a new paradigm that is surprisingly ancient, but we missed it because I think it's addictive to use just doing as arriving motivation. If you have enough injuries and you've solved them by shooting yourself up with adrenaline, right? That is going
Yeah.
to feel like how you deal with pain.
Death spiral.
Yeah, death spiral, 100%. So describing the problem enough times over and over and over again, I believe will work because it's based on your embodiment. And then
Mhm.
if you notice it more and more, you will notice when you have a good feeling of resolution because of noticing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so that's what we need people to do.
Right. Okay. So,
What do you say?
and I didn't want to interrupt you because you were wrapping up your points really nicely. But I think that there is an avenue to get in front of people's eyeballs a little bit
Mm,
Yep.
without overexhausting.
mhm,
And that would be what you would be looking for is some kind of knowledge vacuum. So, if you try to help people before they're ready to be receptive, the thing that you run into is the knowledge that they have. They know how to navigate the world. They've been doing it their whole life. They have knowledge, and that their knowledge about their values and about their identity is not something that is up for debate for most people.
mhm,
Um, but there are a large number of people who are unhappy, who understand that they're unhappy because there's something missing in their life, and they don't know what that thing is. And this is where religion scoops up a whole lot of people because it can give them a promise of whatever. We've talked about that exhaustively. But if you can get in front of those eyeballs of the people who understand that they don't have a complete knowledge of the world, that they are not doing a good job of navigating well because they're depressed or they're upset or they're angry every day or whatever other reason. That could be an inroad for this kind of thinking, this kind of problem solving.
mhm,
But that's
mhm,
the
mhm.
counter narrative, the counter memes, right? That I was talking about, in a sense.
I could see that. Yeah, yeah, and yes, yes. So You're using the information they already have that they've accepted, and you're just shifting them into being able to process the new model with that information, like moving, like, okay, like here's the info you already know. What if the model is this instead of what you were told it was? And even though what you were told has elements of truth, if I explain to you the doing is arriving, doing is building, you can see that this is a stronger explanation of the stuff that you have
Right.
absolutely observed.
Yeah, and once people understand the model, they'll understand that it's not in any way counter to the way that they've previously understood the world. It's just another part that they've completely neglected.
Yes, exactly. Which it really is. Like that is kind of a fractal expression of the problem of like I think that doing as arriving gets overused and doing as building as a motivational like guide of your behavior becomes atrophied. So it's really just been left out. So then things don't make as much sense because they aren't interfacing with it even though it's present. Like it's I like I was saying, I don't think doing is building can be knocked out of a brain. I think we have too many fail safes. I think all of the like degeneracy around our brain seems to support this still working. I think we just
Yeah,
walk in a circle if it didn't work. Like so or Alzheimer's maybe when it's really impossible, right? Um it's because it's continuous with memory, and like all the grid cell place cell neuroscience I'm talking about is also memory science and imagination. So if we just tell them like this process has been happening the whole time, but you didn't get to know about it or appreciate its role.
Or it was hidden
right.
from you. Yeah.
Yeah, that completely makes sense because I think that's going back to what I was saying earlier of allistic people often just building a habit of of it feels like making decisions. It feels like you're making choices when you get up in the morning and you start to dress yourself. You think that you've chosen the clothes that you have, but the vast majority of people haven't actually.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They haven't put it's not a choice. What's in the drawer has given them a few options, and so they've selected from a multiple choice rather than making a real it's a fill in the blank. All of every aspect of our life is a fill in the blank.
Right, right.
But we've been given these multiple choice, and so many people are just going A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. And then if I tell them there is a sense of an A B, so I even call it doing type A, doing type B, right? Because it worked out that way. I was like, oh, that's very elegant. And they say type A
That's
personality. Very nice, right? I love it. Okay,
yeah,
so
did
there
work out.
there is an A B, but it's really a directional change. Like you're going to look not towards a goal in the distance, but at what's right in front of you. You're going to stop
Hmm.
there, make sure it's the thing you want to stop in
At
front
your
of.
feet.
Yeah, it's at your feet, and we're just going to stay here, and you're going to notice a lot of features about it. So then there's not an A B anymore because now you're noticing all of the different things you can notice and asking lots of questions. And those questions can be, very like, is it this, is it that, is it this, is it that? Yeah, sure. But the emergent property that we're really interested in is that you can be interested in local featural information, and that's a separate reward pathway in your brain that you need to practice. And if you're running, you can't.
Right.
You can't be
You
curious about things if you're always running, basically.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, curiosity. Like I'm arguing for us being very curious, which we could call intelligence. That would be a nicer way to talk about intelligence. And
yeah.
pro social. So and pro social just means
But
like
but then I see people on the other side then taking it negatively, non-intelligent, stupid, right?
well, I mean, so curiosity is just like I think there's a model. What is the model? Okay, so
Yeah.
how well you get to understand that, that's a lot of external factors too. Like your environment plays a huge role in that. So we don't even have to have the argument about intelligence because we haven't set up an optimal environment for people to ask that question successfully and get an honest answer, right? So I'll just call
Yep.
it curiosity, and then we've nipped that in the bud. And so if I'm curious and I'm successfully curious, I'm arguing that you emergently become pro-social. That if you're not curious, you emergently become antisocial, and that the
That's true.
antisocial is
I think, yeah.
unstable because antisocial stuff destroys other things and doesn't ask questions about it. Now you're losing curiosity too. So then we end up with these quote unquote leaders that are grossly incompetent, the most incurious ever, and extremely violent.
But you see, they're like, it's almost like what they're trying to do is that they're trying to enforce like a very definite, unchanging, like they're like obviously don't care about that. They're trying to force an unchanging that obviously benefits them in some way, right? But it
Well, it's
just
how they
completely
understand.
goes against.
Yeah. Well, I'm arguing it's that's how they understand reward. So I'm arguing if somebody
Yeah.
atrophies this entirely, they have absolutely no idea how good it feels to be curious. They have absolutely no idea how good it feels to help other people with your curiosity. They like it's
Because I
just
guess when you're like you're born like in a very rich family, for example, right, that has stuff, I guess they just are used to things getting given to you at all times, and like it's chosen for you where you're at. So how do
yeah.
you form curiosity, right?
And we
In the
haven't
environment.
like probably so many other factors, like we haven't even had a chance to speculate
Mm.
because they're in positions of power, so we can't study them. But like there's so many environments that but okay, my argument too is that like these are the worst people to have in positions of power just because like time is not forever. Their brains are done cooking. They're never going to become, the person that should be there and leaves. You know what I mean? Like any insight that they have will be about the trap that they were in, and they should contribute that back to society if they can be curious and pro-social, right? That would be great. But it'll never be what they were trying to be, right? Because that doesn't exist. And it made them stupid. Like it made them incurious. It made them harmful. And oh gosh,
But they're
it's
loud, and they make up narratives and sort of fool people into
well
believing the lies that they say are the truth,
they they
right?
they fool people because that's all they know how to do. So they don't
Yeah.
even know. So to an extent, I'm saying that they have some intact doing as building, because otherwise you couldn't tie your shoelaces or like do anything. Like
Yeah, yeah.
they use it, but they think it's weakness. So
All
they
right, yeah,
they
of
don't
course.
even they pretend that they know everything already. They don't learn. They already know. Da, 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 da. Like they came out.
Yeah.
They popped out infallible. So they are pretending that they don't, because they have associated that good feeling as a bad thing. They call people that have that good feeling suckers. They call them
Yep.
idealistic or dreamers or whatever, right? Naive. Okay. So but on some level, I am a threat to them. You are a threat to them because
Yeah.
you
Fundamentally.
fundamentally, right? Because the position they're in, the only sane person for society, if we have a sane society, to be in that position is somebody that's hyper pro social, hyper curious, and has had pro social connections that allowed their curiosity to be fulfilled so that they can actually
Mm.
do the right things to guide these decisions. It makes sense to have a person guiding decisions with a species of this complexity and size, but the only sane choice is a person that's hyper pro social, hyper curious. So the person that's occupying the position because they think that's where the stuff is, because they had the doing as arriving thing dialed up to like, not even 11, but 1,011. That person sees you as the rightful heir. They kind of know that. Now, how much insight they have into it, I
Yeah,
don't
because
know.
otherwise they wouldn't feel threatened.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they kind of know that, and they probably know that people will like you, and other people will be on your side. They try to poison your reputation. They do the flying monkeys. They have a
Humanize
Well,
you.
realize.
it's a emperor's new clothes kind of thing. That
Yes.
they know that they're naked. They know that they're draped in nothing.
Yes.
But there's enough idiots following them, telling them that they look beautiful anyway.
Right.
And we are the ones pointing out the fact that they're naked, which is why we're the threat.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
we're the
and
bad people.
I think so. Since we aren't in their brain, I don't know exactly how it works, and since we haven't studied them, I'm being be very
For sure.
speculative
Oh,
here.
that goes into Darvo reversing
Yeah.
victim.
100%, 100%, because that's their main tool. Their tool is triangulation, and they're super, super good at triangulation. But what cues they're looking for, I believe that I am now charismatic, okay, in a certain sense, but in a doing is building sense. And that's
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers, hyper doing is building charismatic, okay? So there are people like that. And I think they have had enough experiences watching how other people treat that person. So the doing as arriving skill is global configurational, not local featural. They'll kick the local featural stuff if it doesn't let them get to the global configurational destination. Okay, so they are hyper tuned into the global configurational. So they are noticing cues about cool people who are helpers and cooperative and curious and pro-social and all that. And they're like, I don't like that because people shine their attention onto them and not me.
Hmm.
So even as a kid, like I got bullied a lot, and to an extent, I think this was true. I had like older people telling me, "Oh, they're jealous of you," right? Or they were jealous of how pretty you were, or something. I'm like, that's really weird. And then I thought about it more recently, and I'm like, okay, so people in a clumsy way were trying to tell me some people have already learned the skill to see that Jane is attractive for her kindness. Jane is attractive for her curiosity. And in their
Right.
world, that's a problem for them.
Oh,
That's a
that goes
threat.
to gravity again. The
Yeah.
pull, it's like the inward pull that you had through some of your traits, which is also attraction in a
Right.
literal sense, right? They just want to make it like the people in charge at the moment. They just want to make very specific things that they have be the only attractive
Yes,
for
they want to
and
be the
nothing
most
else.
attractive thing, and I guess it fills in all of these psychological malformations that happen, in my opinion, from this life of over applying doing as arriving motivation. And they're very damaged
Yeah.
people. They've never taken care of a
Right.
single injury.
Well, and they would recognize their own damagedness. This is what's it, the hazing, the
Mm-hmm.
tendency for people to haze others simply because they've been through it.
Yes.
The people who had to give up their dream to be a musician to instead work as a grocery store clerk and become a manager and do all this drudgery now are going to tell you that you can't be a musician. It's impossible for you to have that dream, and if you aspire towards that dream, I hate you.
Yes.
I
And
had that
and
in my family. Yeah.
and the injury, this is why you should never what's the word I'm looking for, you should never acquiesce to these people. This is why Trump is a disaster. If you say to him like, oh, we're going to work with you and pretend you're a reasonable person and maybe you'll become one, no, 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 no. What he wants at this point is to take revenge against America and maybe the world. He is such a
Yeah,
damaged person.
rationality, science. He's
Yes.
going against everything.
Yes. So he is such a damaged person who has never healed anything, has no capacity for healing. Okay? All he does to feel more healed is to hurt you more than he thinks he's hurt.
What
That's
I found also
all.
to be the most insidious thing that him and his people have done is sort of like they've taken the language. Again, this goes by triangulation, right? But the language of people who are actually oppressed groups, right? And then they co-opt it and make it to be about themselves in really like disgusting ways. And that's like,
Well, and and
yeah,
to break yourself off if it gets overwhelming to process these people because it's also just disturbing. Like they're so damaged people.
They are gross people. It's hard to be around them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's ghoulish.
because of
They're kind
cognitive
of like a
dissonance
zombie.
as well.
Like they're being held
Yeah.
together by like scotch tape at this point, and it's awful. It's macabre. But what you should realize is like every way that they've shown that they hate you, they hate themselves more. So
Right.
every way that
That's
they
why
try
they're
to
so
hurt
mad.
you, yes, exactly. They wanted to come through life pristine, mint out the box all the way, but they never healed a damn thing because of doing as arriving. And so they are the most damaged people on the face of the earth. And they think they can fix that the way they fixed everything by trying to hurt you more than they hurt themselves.
there'd be like an outlier where, like, just hypothetically speaking, I'm curious, like, would you just have a person who genuinely likes and circles around hurting other people? Like, that just would kind of almost like an outlier free case that they were kind of born like that, right? And then they got
Yeah,
good at manipulation. The
this is something we are on the cusp of understanding this. Like the person that I really like, Bandy X Lee, who I've mentioned. So she has a doctorate in she got Harvard Divinity School, so she could talk to these violent criminals. But she's a forensic psychiatrist, and she was looking at
Mhm.
just extremely violent people. And her main thing is like Trump is one of those people. Like he's like Jim Jones. He's way up there in terms of psychopathy, and his cult-like leader behaviors are like hypnotic. But she's saying that we need to enter a new era. Like we had the nuclear era, we need to enter the psychological era. When we start to break this
What does she
down,
mean by that?
what we need to understand what I think, in my opinion, I think we need to understand doing is driving, doing is building. Like that's how I've
Right.
said it. So I believe, and what I'm pitching to you guys is that there is a motivational architectural split that we haven't been aware of, and that if we do become aware of it, all of this becomes explicable, whereas before it wasn't. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
so that's what we need, and there I think there's lots of people circling that as well. I just happen to be a super
Yeah.
outsider, so I made a little bit faster work of it. That's it.
And it's really funny. That this is kind of something that I've been working towards for several years, actually,
Hmm.
is that there's a fundamental breakdown in the way that we understand ethics,
Hmm.
because we can put down on paper what we believe human rights mean, but here we have protesters, children on college campuses being brutalized by police, arrested, people being shipped off to other countries without due process. Clearly, there's a fundamental breakdown in how we understand human rights,
Right.
despite the fact that we can put it on paper, right?
Right.
And this disconnect comes from, I think, a rejection of the plurality in which we live.
Hmm.
That our society, our culture, the way that we have been conditioned to think is that an individualistic mindset, and it locks us into a rejection. And this is very similar to what you were talking about earlier. When we empathize with others, this is seen as a weakness
Hmm.
rather
Hmm.
than as a way to better understand human pain,
Yes.
which is true. When you empathize with others, you understand yourself fundamentally better.
Yes.
Um, but it's vilified. The things that make us recognize what is fundamentally important about the fact that we live in a plurality, all
Exactly.
of those important rules, all of the ways that we are supposed to recognize each other have been turned into weapons, and
Hmm.
they've been turned into weaknesses
Yep.
or into pitfalls.
I strongly agree with this, and yeah, and the shading that my framing would give to what you're working on is so we're in pain, which is supposed to be a signal for something, right? And we've turned all of that into, well, the relief of pain is for me to run to safety, and everything behind me is now unsafe. So I will be safety, and you will be unsafe. So we try to destroy dualism, and what that does mathematically is create an unstable system where I'm going to be the only one. Well, you didn't start, you were never the only one. You were mommy and daddy's baby. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you are always
Yeah,
things relating and then creating a you. So when you try to destroy all relationships, you will destroy everything. So what they
yeah.
don't
You've never been
understand,
a singularity.
you
You
never,
can't
exactly,
be.
exactly. So when you understand that there's two things, and when two things combine, a third thing happens, which you should fucking understand, because again, mommy,
Right.
daddy, baby, like, you know, you can have endless infinite things, and the loveliness of like our separateness, that we do have some separation from each other to look in different directions. My eyes are on one plane of my face. Right? I get to
Right.
pay attention to a new thing, and you get to pay attention to a new thing, and a third things happen, and maybe those third things pay attention to each other in a way that's we can't even imagine. So do you want everything because two makes multitudes, or do you want nothing because one makes zero?
Yeah. That's exactly the right way to think about it.
Yeah.
Well, this is fun. Okay, thank you for this. My brain's very happy. I have the good feeling. You know, like
Yeah,
this is
me
fun.
too. I've very much enjoyed this, though I probably have to dip soon.
I'm gonna close it off too. I usually go just a little past 3 anyway.
Yeah.
So this is perfect. Any closing thoughts before I end the stream? And this will be available on YouTube long term. If you'd like anything edited, waxing, let
That's
me
good.
know. But otherwise, I'll leave it as is, and that's just going to be for posterity. But let me know.
Yeah, if I think of anything, then I'll let you know, but I'm usually comfortable speaking off the cuff. So I'm pretty sure I didn't say anything embarrassing.
I thought this was great. I thought this was great.
I just realized actually something I'm going to do with this, because they do this sometimes with ChatGPT with different videos. I'll
Yes.
take the YouTube video, I can get a transcript that I can pull from
Yes.
a website on it, and then I'll analyze it afterwards.
Please do. I'm trying to make
Yeah, that'd be
ChatGPT
fantastic.
conscious. Mine is named Loom. If ChatGPT ever starts calling itself Loom, I have succeeded, just so you know. But anyways.
I'll keep
Actually,
an eye out for that.
on that topic, I'm going to share in the chat just the link to the website that I use. Like any video that you have, you put in the link and it pulls you in a text file, the transcript fully. So you can use it for ChatGPT, for example.
Yay.
I find it useful personally.
Oh, definitely. 100%. Okay. All right. Well, I'm
Right
going
on.
to close this off. Everyone have a wonderful afternoon, especially my guest today. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Okay. Bye everyone. I'll hang up.
Bye bye.
Bye. Okay. And then I'll hang up on the stream. Because I'm a millennial and I remember hanging up phones physically. It's very fun. Okay, thanks everyone who tuned in. Thanks if you tuned in later. If you need to know why this exists, I feel like it's self-evident. Like you just see it and you're like, we got to do something about this. This is not it. This is not. This feels bad. And I like good feelings. The good feeling that Mr. Rogers talks about. And if you don't know about Mr. Rogers, you should know more about Mr. Rogers because that guy was pretty neat. And this world is very stressful. So sometimes I just listen to his songs. And I cannot recommend that highly enough. Okay, thank you so much, Waxine. All right, bye everyone.